we want to talk about this SEC rewards program, and that we think it may be likely how the Richard Hart complaint was reported. So, what are your what do you know about this SEC rewards program for whistleblowers that do come to them with any kind of information they may have, regardless of how much they're bending the truth whenever they send it to the SEC? And I believe it is they actually do get the form of monetary reward
Yeah,
dependent upon how much money the SEC is basically able to extract from
sure.
said person, entity, whatever. So, what do you think the validity level is of that? This whistleblower program is how the Richard Hart complaint, really came to light, and what do you know about this program overall?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it. What I did read, and it was I don't forget when it was, but I think they give 10 or 15% of anything that was over $1 million, I believe is what it stated. Anything over $1 million that got payout, the whistleblower received 10 or 15% of that, which that's a substantial amount of money. What I can totally see why people would do it, and just see if anything could stick. Maybe even thinking that Richard would just settle, because he
Yeah.
said that many a times about EOS. Whenever they had to pay the fine, he's like, "Well, they just paid a fine and moved on." So, you know, I I think it's bad. I think anybody could file suit against anybody, and if it goes anywhere, or if they just pay the fine, that person's being rewarded for being a snitch. Man, I don't like it. I'm not a fan. I think you get a lot of mixed signals. Again, we don't have clarity to begin with, and now you're paying people to just throw false accusations. It muddies everything. I don't like it at all.
Well,
How
one
about
thing I
you?
want to say is, well, and I think you just did this because it's natural to say this when you're discussing something like this. But a moment ago, you said like it incentivizes people being a snitch. Well, they're not really being a snitch, because the second part of what you just said is the actual truth. And it's to, muddy the waters of what really happened or what you think the product is, to report essentially falsehoods, as we've seen. The debate as to whether Hex is a security or not, whatever, leave that up to them and all the different definitions they want to come up with every week or whatever. But in terms of like, oh yeah, Richard Hart with investor funds and things like that, I mean, we've talked about that. As far as we can see, literally on the blockchain, that's provably false. So and we've all talked about like how a lot of the complaint from the SEC reads like somebody who is totally uneducated on all of this wrote it. So it's like, are they taking literally, is there that much credibility given to one person who bought the top, sold the low, felt like they were scammed when Hex did what a lot of other tokens did in the last cycle, except better? Is it really, were they scammed, or was it just your terrible behavior that led to this, and you can't stomach that and figure that it must be, the somebody else's fault, and you want to tell the SEC?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you buy tops and sell bottoms, that's kind of not anybody's fault but your own. Unfortunately, like I said, I think this just kind of incentivizes those type of behaviors. When somebody doesn't like something, they can report it no matter how true or not, and if it sticks, if any of it sticks, and they get some sort of settlement, they get paid for it. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. But there's all kind of people out there, so
It's definitely a terrible way to go about it. But I mean, like, that's why, somebody, it really always comes down to who wants it more, and what somebody's actual goals are at the end of the day. And if they, are collecting data based on, hey, we'll pay you if you come to us with something, and somebody who is just some loser who's reporting something that's a half truth or something like that because they didn't want to take responsibility for it. I mean, that versus somebody who has, employed or had people create a blockchain that lives and breathes this stuff every single day, it may not be much of a fight. So, we'll see how that goes. I don't want to necessarily get in. We've talked ad nauseum about will Richard try to settle? Will there be a long, how long will this last? I mean, we among many others have talked about that ad nauseum, so we don't need to necessarily go there. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely if you want to talk about scam, definitely a scammy type of program that the SEC does offer there, and we'll kind of see where we go from there.